There was no explosion when Linda Hamilton stepped away from the peak. No scandal, no public collapse, no clearly defined has-been moment for the media to pin down. There was only a prolonged absence, a space where audiences suddenly realized that the woman who once made the world believe women could survive the apocalypse had disappeared from her own stage. She was the face that changed the history of action cinema. Sarah Connor did not cry to be saved. She learned to hold a gun, to harden her body, and to accept becoming someone the world had to fear. But as that character became immortal, the woman behind it began to unravel. Fame arrived too quickly. The spotlight burned too intensely, and the price was never paid on screen. And behind that steel-cold image was a person living in a constant state of vigilance against her own emotions. Success did not bring peace. Admiration could not soothe the dark undercurrents. The higher Linda Hamilton rose, the closer she came to being permanently locked inside the image of Sarah Connor. And if the whole world believes you are strong beyond destruction, are you still allowed to be fragile? Linda Hamilton's story is not a journey from poverty to glory and then collapse. It is the story of an extraordinary talent, a symbol forged through pain, and a woman who was forced to choose between continuing to live as a legend or saving herself. The lights, the roles, and the steel-forged image of womanhood audiences remember are only the surface of a life that began very early with absence. Long before Linda Hamilton learned to hold a gun, tense her muscles, or stand upright before a camera, she had to learn how to remain standing before something far larger, the unnameable absence of a father in her earliest years. Linda Carol Hamilton was born in 1956 in Salisbury, Maryland, into what appeared to be a stable, middle-class family. Her father was a physician, a literal pillar of her childhood. But when Linda was only 5, he died in a car accident. His death did not arrive with a violent explosion. It left behind a prolonged silence that quietly seeped into every corner of family life. Her mother later remarried a local police officer, restoring a sense of outward stability, but nothing could fill the loss that had formed too early inside Linda. She grew up alongside an older sister, a younger brother, and an identical twin who looked exactly like her, yet constantly made Linda feel she had something to push against. Leslie Hamilton was not just a mirror, but a shadow that forced Linda to repeatedly assert difference. During her school years, Linda deliberately changed her hairstyle, her clothing, even her attitude toward life. An instinctive act of self-defense. If she could not escape loss, at least she could escape being blended into someone else. This rebellion was not the recklessness of adolescence, but a quiet search for identity carried out in silence. Linda later described her family life as monotonous and closed off, lacking emotional stimulation. She found escape in books, in imagination, and in amateur school performances, where she and her sister stood on stage without any thought of an acting career. As a child, Linda did not dream of becoming an actress. She imagined herself in more physical, outward-facing roles: firefighter, archaeologist, professions tied to rescue, excavation, or the recovery of what had been lost. Adolescence also marked the first fractures in Linda's relationship with her own body and mind. The pressure to be different, the prolonged sense of alienation, combined with a grief that was never given a name, led her to food as a form of comfort. Weight gain was not merely a physical change, it was the visible sign of an inner world trying to shield itself. That after graduating from Wicomico High School, Linda attended Washington College for 2 years, joining the theater program not as a final commitment, but as a tentative choice, one that nevertheless opened the first door leading her away from the narrow confines of childhood. Leaving Maryland in the late 1970s, Linda Hamilton arrived in New York without a conquering plan or fantasies of stage lights. The city presented itself as a space large enough to hold disturbances she could not yet name. A place that promised no safety but allowed one to set anxiety down on solid ground and look straight at it. New York was cold, cramped, and unsentimental, and precisely because of that, Linda felt no need to perform stability. She entered acting training not as someone searching for technique, but as someone searching for a way to survive emotions that were always on the verge of spilling out of control. At the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute, method acting was not taught as a formula, but as a prolonged confrontation. Linda did not learn how to manufacture emotion. She learned how not to avoid it. But training sessions forced students to excavate memory, face fear, anger, abandonment, things without clear shape yet leaving marks on the body. For Linda, this approach was not merely an acting method, but a matter of survival. She learned how to remain inside discomfort, to let tension register on her face, in an unflinching gaze, in breathing that was not regulated to look beautiful. Her performance style took shape from there, unpolished, unsoftened, weighted toward psychological life, allowing characters to unsettle audiences, even disturb them, but never let them look away. After moving to California, Linda entered a quiet, uneven professional phase, where each role felt more like a test than a launch pad. Night Flowers, 1979, marked her first appearance on the big screen, but brought no broad attention. The following years unfolded in a steady yet punishing rhythm. Small television roles in series like Shirley and Hill Street Blues, alongside TV films that directly tackled social issues such as reunion and rape and marriage, The Rideout Case. These were not projects that generated quick fame, but they demanded real presence, no room for display or safe performance. In 1982, Tag. The Assassination Game gave Linda her first leading role in a feature film. The movie made little impact, but her taut gaze, compressed energy, and ever-threatening sense of instability were enough to draw the attention of industry observers. Being named a promising actress by John Willis's Screen World during this period functioned as a faint yet meaningful signal. Something was taking shape, even if no one could yet name it. Running parallel to these slow professional advances was an inner life that grew increasingly difficult to control, especially in the early 1980s, as the pressure to survive in the entertainment industry began to weigh heavily. Depression and bipolar disorder were not yet diagnosed, leaving emotional swings sudden, intense, and unexplained. An acting method that forced the psyche wide open, combined with the precariousness of a young actress without secure footing, led Linda at times to cope in misguided ways. Alcohol and stimulants offered no solution, but became temporary anchors during long, sleepless nights. It was in this period of constant collision that her acting grew sharper and more unpredictable. Not because technique had been perfected, but because unresolved inner conflicts had seeped into every role, creating a distinctive pull, unsafe, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. The year 1984 did not begin with promise, but with a vague sense of risk as The Terminator entered production. In the eyes of much of the crew, it was merely a small-scale science fiction project with a budget of around $6.4 million, a rushed schedule, rough working conditions, and no margin for error. Linda Hamilton stepped into the role of Sarah Connor without a body shaped for action cinema, but carrying something rarer than technique: genuine anxiety. Sarah was not written as a figure waiting to be saved. She panicked, stumbled, made mistakes, and was forced to learn survival minute by minute. Linda allowed fear to surface without polish, hesitation, ragged breath, and a gaze out of sync, so that the character's transformation unfolded before the audience's eyes, raw and unsettling. When the film was released, the response exceeded all expectations. Global box office climbed to roughly $78 million, turning a dismissed project into a cultural phenomenon. The role earned a Saturn Award nomination and was later recognized by the U.S. Library of Congress as part of America's film heritage. Yet alongside that recognition, a new frame began to close in around Linda. The woman hunted, pushed into danger, surviving by instinct. Success placed her at the center of attention while simultaneously narrowing her range of opportunities as the industry quickly read her through the lens of perpetual threat. Her subsequent workload reflected the pressure of that frame. Also in 1984, Children of the Corn was released, profitable despite harsh criticism. Once again, Linda was placed in dangerous circumstances where tension served as the primary engine. In 1986 came Black Moon Rising, an attempt to expand her action territory, followed by King Kong Lives, a heavily promoted project that failed in the U.S. market. The film found a different afterlife in the Soviet Union, where it became one of the decade's most successful foreign releases. These contradictory numbers did not liberate Linda. They clarified her fragile position. Famous enough to be typecast, not powerful enough to break the cast. The glow of early success simultaneously erected new limits, forcing every subsequent step to carry a sense of caution, as if that first triumph had already begun setting conditions for the road ahead. After a series of roles that repeatedly placed her characters in states of pursuit and suffocation by danger, 1987 marked a deliberate turn when Linda Hamilton accepted the lead role in Beauty and the Beast. Instead of the rapid pacing of action cinema, she entered the long-form structure of prime-time television, where each episode demanded psychological endurance rather than explosive moments. Linda's character was not designed to elicit sympathy through weakness. She was an intellectual, principled woman who maintained moral balance within a world of constant conflict. Strength here came from the ability to listen, choose, endure, and preserve identity under repeated trials. A quiet intensity rarely seen in mainstream time slots that favor overt drama. The show's 3-season run required Linda to sustain emotional consistency across dozens of episodes, where subtle shifts in gaze or timing became the true measures of performance. She controlled the character through restraint, allowing conflict to accumulate over time rather than be released immediately. That pacing drew audiences in and also led industry observers to recognize the role as proof of dramatic range, independent of spectacle. In 1989, that recognition took form in a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Television Drama, along with 2 Emmy nominations, milestones confirming that Linda did not survive on action iconography alone, but commanded the long emotional arc of television storytelling. Standing firmly in that position, Linda chose a risky next step. In 1991, she returned as Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, but this time as a figure entirely reshaped by time and obsession. The project expanded to an unprecedented scale, with a budget of roughly $102 million and a global box office of around $520 million. To prepare, Linda subjected herself to months of punishing discipline, extreme physical training, weapons instruction, and the reprogramming of posture and reflexes to match a body permanently on alert. She accepted personal risk by performing many of her own stunts, trading safety for credibility on screen. On screen, Sarah Connor was no longer panicked. Fear had transformed into constant vigilance. The character bore the marks of prolonged trauma, hardened, decisive, prepared to act before emotion could surface. This transformation was not about displaying physical power, but about articulating the cost of surviving too long with an ever-approaching collapse. The response was immediate and forceful. A Saturn Award for Best Actress, an MTV Movie Award for Best Female Performance, and a permanent place in popular memory. From this point on, the 1991 version of Sarah Connor became a new benchmark for the female hero, where strength was inseparable from obsession, and every victory carried traces of what could never be recovered. Before the aftershock of 1991 had fully settled, the early 1990s opened with Linda Hamilton in a state of difficult imbalance. The glow of Terminator 2 remained, but the trajectory of her work began to branch. Rather than staying at the center of large-scale projects, she deliberately moved toward emotionally demanding roles with less protection from effects or budgets. A Mother's Prayer emerged in this period as a conscious choice. A woman with AIDS confronting death through clarity and responsibility with no space for heroics. The role forced Linda to compress emotion into small details, the careful preparation of a child's future, fear that seeped rather than erupted. Recognition came in the form of a Cable Ace Award and a Golden Globe nomination, but more importantly, it signaled her departure from the gravitational pull of the action symbol toward professionally riskier terrain. Mid-decade, as the market increasingly favored younger faces and faster pacing, Linda returned to mainstream cinema with Dante's Peak in 1997. The film placed her within a disaster framework where decisions had to be made in seconds, far removed from television's extended psychological rhythms. A box office of roughly $178 million and a Blockbuster Entertainment Award confirmed that audiences still trusted her presence on the big screen. Yet alongside that success came less comfortable choices. Silent Fall and Separate Lives continued to push her toward unstable, morally complex characters, while Shadow Conspiracy faltered, and exposing the fragility of post-peak positioning, where a single misaligned project could recalibrate market perception. By the late 1990s, as major opportunities slipped away, from A Few Good Men to Batman Forever and Star Trek Voyager, Linda did not disappear. She shifted. She moved into voice acting, allowing her voice to carry character weight in Batman Beyond and Hercules, distancing herself from image-driven pressure. Theater became another space to sustain acting discipline, where audience response was unedited. As Hollywood continued accelerating youth-centered action cinema and power shifted away from the generation that had defined earlier standards, Linda was edged out of the core not by collapse, but by the gradual erosion of opportunity. Entering the early 2000s, Linda Hamilton consciously stepped away from the logic of constant visibility that had governed her career for more than a decade. This was not an abrupt disappearance, but a deliberate deceleration after years of exposure to extreme intensity and expectation. Work continued, but no longer in clusters. Projects arrived less frequently, more lightly, allowing her to remain an actor without being consumed by promotion cycles or box office pressure. Television series, TV movies, and stage work aligned better with this new rhythm. Spaces where she could appear, leave a mark, and withdraw at the right moment. During this period, Linda's role choices increasingly reflected a consistent principle: avoiding extended franchises, sidestepping heavy PR machinery, and refusing positions that required carrying symbolic weight. In appearances across Weeds, Lost Girl, and Defiance, she often played figures of quiet authority, sharp, controlled, without dominating the frame. By 2010 to 2012, her role in Chuck made that shift unmistakable. Linda entered the narrative as a silent force, strong enough to destabilize others, then exited without claiming center stage. This was performance rooted in control, not assertion. That quiet lasted nearly a decade, until the late 2000s raised a question Linda could no longer avoid: whether her relationship with Sarah Connor needed closure. This return was not driven by nostalgia or ambition to reclaim prominence, but by a desire for a final dialogue with a character intertwined with her own inner life. When she agreed to appear in Terminator: Dark Fate in 2019, Linda set clear conditions. Sarah Connor had to be allowed to age, to carry visible wear, and not be softened or idealized to match contemporary entertainment rhythms. On screen, Sarah Connor appeared weathered, bitter, living with memory as an ingrained survival reflex. The film fell short commercially, but Linda's performance emerged as its clearest emotional anchor, an unadorned presence that simply stood and forced audiences to confront the cost of prolonged survival. At this stage, the return did not open a loud new chapter, but placed a quiet, full stop, where character and actor met at the same maturity of experience and limitation. The pressure of early fame did not only narrow Linda Hamilton's professional options, it seeped into her private life at a moment when she had not yet built a stable anchor of her own. In the early 1980s, amid relentless shooting schedules and the sensation of being constantly observed, Linda met Bruce Abbott on the set of Tag: The Assassination Game. At the time, both were on the margins of the industry's center, unshielded by fame, sharing the very real precariousness of young actors trying to find footing. Abbott carried a quiet, grounded presence, understated and practical, a calming counterweight to Linda's increasingly tense world. Their closeness grew out of long working hours and the relief of being seen as a person learning how to live with the profession, rather than as an image in need of shaping. When they married in 1982, the mismatch in pace quickly surfaced. Linda's career accelerated violently after The Terminator. Extended shoots, role pressure, and public expectation followed her home. Abbott continued moving at a slower rhythm within his own orbit, accustomed to routines that were steady and predictable. The disparity accumulated into prolonged silences, where Linda withdrew for weeks at a time, then erupted into suspicion and anger without a clear point of origin. Emotional fluctuations that had not yet been named, depression, and irregular manic swings distorted the household atmosphere, placing Abbott in a position of wanting to be a support while being pushed beyond the circle of safety. By the late 1980s, when Linda became pregnant with their son, Dalton, the fragility could no longer be concealed. The pregnancy unfolded alongside intense inner upheavals, adding pressure to a relationship already under strain. Abbott did not leave immediately. His staying on extended into a sense of helplessness as the distance between them grew harder to bridge. The roles of husband and father were placed under the weight of a life neither could fully control, where love was forced to withstand waves of emotion that arrived without warning. The marriage ended as Linda stood at the threshold of a new chapter in her career, leaving behind the responsibilities of single motherhood and a deep private wound. That experience did not disappear with the divorce papers. It restructured the way Linda later understood intimacy. The love was no longer a natural refuge, but a space prone to activating fears accumulated from very early on. Fears tied to a life pushed forward too fast, to the necessity of existing publicly while keeping the inner life from collapsing. From the first marital rupture, Linda Hamilton entered a state of heightened vigilance toward intimacy, a dual condition in which the need to be understood coexisted with the fear of losing emotional control. It was within this gap that her connection with James Cameron formed along professional lines before taking on personal color. Cameron had sensed an unnamed energy in Linda when casting her in The Terminator. Years later, as Terminator 2 was prepared, that professional thread tightened under the weight of a massive project. On set, two strong personalities collided at high intensity, Cameron pursued near-total control over shooting rhythm and cinematic breath. Linda carried the raw force of method acting, willing to push herself to physical and psychological limits. And attraction arose from the feeling of being fully seen, the belief that the other understood her more deeply than the public ever could. Preparation for Terminator. Two pulled the relationship into a difficult zone where life and creation were nearly indistinguishable. The training regimen imposed on Linda reached rare intensity. Her body was restructured, daily habits disrupted, her mind kept in constant alert. Cameron functioned as an unrelenting driving force and simultaneously as a continuous source of tension, where artistic demands always preceded personal comfort. Affection that grew in this environment took on an obsessive tone, intense, dependent, prone to conflict, as both were accustomed to operating at high speed under exacting standards. On screen, Sarah Connor emerged as a body disciplined by fear. Off screen, Linda paid with episodes of exhaustion and deep depression, while Cameron moved forward with expanding professional power. When the film premiered and achieved global impact, the spotlight did not bring peace. It exposed the divergence between their rhythms. Linda stood between public adoration and inner volatility that was difficult to manage. Cameron, at the height of influence, was accustomed to systems where everything bent to creative vision. Their decision to marry in 1997, coinciding with Cameron's completion of Titanic, placed shared life under continuous tension between two frames of reference. One needing space to stabilize psychologically, the other pressing ahead with ever larger projects. The birth of their daughter Josephine brought a rare moment of bonding while simultaneously amplifying pressure. Postpartum months triggered severe emotional swings in Linda, unleashing anxiety and suspicion without pattern. Yet while Cameron, long accustomed to relentless schedules, struggled to adjust his pace to such fragile needs. By 1999, the marriage dissolved through a process marked by sustained harm. A large financial settlement could not neutralize the long psychological aftermath for Linda. The sense of being absorbed into an image, where love seemed bound to the symbol rather than the real person. In the years that followed, this fracture continued to shape how Linda perceived intimacy and her choice to retreat from the spotlight. The relationship with Cameron carved a harsh lesson about boundaries. When creativity, power, and emotion merge too completely, the cost often falls on the more vulnerable party, leaving lasting marks on how they navigate life and work. At present, Linda Hamilton is not living in a state of retirement, nor does she continue a dramatic withdrawal of the kind the media often assigns to former icons. She has chosen a different rhythm of existence, fewer appearances, fewer statements, and an almost complete separation from the logic of constant visibility demanded by the entertainment industry. Linda does not pursue back-to-back projects, does not maintain a public-facing image, and does not operate her private life as part of a brand. Script reading happens slowly and selectively, guided by a clear criterion. The role must allow the character to exist fully, without being distorted by forced rejuvenation or easy nostalgia. When that condition is not met, she is willing to remain outside, viewing silence not as failure, but as a form of self-preservation. Linda's rare appearances in recent years, interviews, retrospective events, or discussions about cinema, carry no tone of self-congratulation. She speaks of the profession as a journey she has traveled deeply enough to no longer need emphasis. The topics she is willing to engage often revolve around mental health, the cumulative exhaustion of sustained creative intensity, and the personal cost of an on-screen image growing larger than the person behind it. Her presence, therefore, feels timely rather than placed. She appears when there is something worth saying, then withdraws once the story has reached sufficiency. Linda Hamilton's legacy does not rest on the number of roles she played or the frequency of her visibility, but on how she changed cinema's understanding of female strength. Sarah Connor, especially from her early incarnation to her later, hardened form, was not built to please audiences nor to exist as a polished symbol. The character carried fear, vigilance, survival obsession, and psychological fractures left unsoothed. That refusal to soften emotion opened the way for a later generation of female characters, strong without needing perfection, proactive without requiring affection. In a contemporary film landscape increasingly dependent on formulas and accelerated pacing, Linda Hamilton's imprint stands out in her demonstration that an actor can step away from the center without losing gravity. So her insistence on returning only when a character is allowed to age, to carry history and damage, has itself become a professional statement. This legacy is quiet, not framed by trophies or box office records, yet it endures in how audiences remember a single image. A woman standing firm, not because she has won, but because she has survived long enough to no longer need proof. Linda Hamilton has never been called a perfect icon, nor was she ever a face Hollywood rushed to shelter. What keeps her in public memory is not the immortality of an image, but the weight of experience she carried into each role. On screen, she did not play women to be liked. She embodied people forced to exist within fear, obsession, and constant vigilance toward the world around them. Sarah Connor, in her various forms, is not merely an action character. It is the portrait of a person worn down by personal history, yet never broken. What Linda leaves behind is not easy satisfaction. It is the residual tension that lingers after the screen goes dark, the moment when a viewer's gaze slows and recognizes that strength sometimes comes from endurance rather than victory. In an industry accustomed to celebrating youth and easy consumption, Linda Hamilton chose to remain with what is difficult to look at, difficult to touch, and difficult to forget. She showed that acting does not need to beautify pain. It only needs to be honest enough for audiences to recognize a part of themselves within it. Linda Hamilton did not become a legacy because she was flawless, nor because her career followed a smooth arc. She is remembered for daring to bring fragility, damage, and the will to survive onto the screen without asking for sympathy. And perhaps when the image of that woman, walking with a hardened posture, eyes never fully at rest, returns to memory, people understand this. Some actors do not need constant presence to endure. They continue living in the feeling they leave behind. Do you remember a moment of Linda Hamilton that made it impossible for you to look away from the screen? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to continue this journey of exploring the people who have left the deepest marks on art.